Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're talking about the Clone Wars Season 2, Episodes 5-8, in which we track the whole process and aftermath of the Geonosian invasion. All that and more right after this ad we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew, I'm your host. And I'm joined as always for a Clone War discussion by Riki and Sarah Hayashi. How are you folks doing tonight?
Hey, we're alright. How are you?
The Force is with us tonight.
The Force is with us all. It's good to hear. This is going to be a fun group of episodes. 'Cause I think this is the first time where we have every episode we are watching is all part of one plot arc. As I said, I think we get episodes 5-8 really cover, you know, from it basically takes us through a military campaign from the invasion of Geonosis to the Battle of Geonosis to the horror movie of Geonosis to the horror movie in space aftermath of So yeah, it's kind of like 4 different directors got to tell a war story. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, and I think it also really exemplifies how this series is evolving into, like, it was very, very episodic at the beginning of season 1, and now we're getting these, like, bigger arcs, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think I really like this one. Especially it's a bigger arc, and it also just seems, with some noted exceptions, but it seems like we're taking war a lot more seriously. You know, this felt much more like a war movie, until it got to be a horror movie. But like the first 2 episodes, especially, it felt a lot more brutal and a lot more like a Oliver Stone type thing instead of a silly parody of a battle.
Notably, this is the second Battle of Geonosis, because the first Battle of Geonosis took place in the movie Attack of the Clones.
Right.
And for whatever plot reasons, they had to re-invade this planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they mentioned that the Geonosians had reconquered it, in part thanks to these mind control worms that they reveal in the last 2 episodes. So what is your? I think we all have some pretty strong feelings on this, but about the Geonosians. Let me just start. Kind of, what's your overall take on these episodes?
Yeah, I like them. I do like the different flavors that we're getting. Like we've already talked about the last 2 episodes being a horror movie, and I like how they're playing with genre, and including that, but still keeping it in a quote-unquote family-friendly package.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love horror, and I don't get to watch it much anymore because Sarah hates horror.
Fair.
So these episodes were just fine by me, and I actually have something to say. Like, I think in the last podcast, I sounded a little negative about the early season 2 episodes, and I think I figured it out. And that's because, as we discussed off air, Sarah and I are into like the 4th season.
Oh yeah,
where things it gets really good, and we are super invested in the story and the characters. And while season 2 is an improvement from season 1, coming back to it after we have visited even further into the future, I guess I was a little more disappointed than I thought I would be. It's just like relative, right? Like if you watch through season 1, then season 2 is a marked improvement, and you go, "Oh yeah, this is good now." But coming back to it, it's like, but it's not quite as good as it gets.
That may well be a big part of the difference, because for me, season 2 seems fantastic because it's probably 5 years or 6 years since I saw season 4, let alone beyond that. So yeah, I think that's a really good observation. It's also something I can relate to. You guys, I assume, are big Firefly and Buffy and fans of all those kind of Joss Whedon shows.
Yeah.
We were. I don't know.
Okay, that's fair.
I enjoyed them. I certainly enjoyed them in the past. And as you have had discussions on superhero ethics, like
they
Joss
haven't aged
Whedon has
well.
kind of become a questionable person. So it's like, do I still enjoy them? I don't know.
Yeah, and I never watched Firefly when it was on the air. I ended up watching it on Netflix a few ways back after watching Serenity, and I liked Serenity a lot more. And I watched Buffy, but I think those are the only 2 like Whedon TV arcs that I've seen.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I wasn't trying to get into the whole Whedon debate, although I certainly agree with you on that. They've not aged well, and he has not aged well. But my only point was the first Whedon thing I ever saw was Firefly, and then I saw the Buffy musical episode.
Oh, that one's great.
And so then when I was like, okay, I want to go watch this Buffy thing. Let's go start with season 1. And I was like, oh, because the way I described it is like you have your absolute favorite baseball or football player, and then you know who's a professional, and then you get to watch tapes of him in middle school, and you're like, okay, I can see flashes of the talent that I'm going to love, but this person has a lot of growing to do. And I think Clone Wars are the same. Like, this season seems a lot better than season 1, but we're on a pretty sharp up ramp. And so if you're coming back from season 4 and 5, this can seem like it's not quite as good by a lot of measures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same thing with Next Gen. When we watched it, we just skipped seasons 1 and 2. Okay, Riki had seen it before a whole bunch, and I hadn't watched it. I tried to get into it and would always get like halfway through season 1 and then give up.
Yeah.
So when we came back to it, we started with season 3, watched it all, and then went back to seasons 1 and 2. And by that point, it was like I appreciated it because it was just more Star Wars or Star Trek stories. But yeah, it's definitely not as good, but you see the little like kernels of greatness, and I feel like something similar is happening here with this like jumping back and forth. But I totally agree that if you were just watching season 1 straight into season 2, such a drastic difference.
Well, it makes a lot more sense though now because Riki, I remember when you first got to season 2, you were texting me like, "Wow, this is so much better," and so I was very confused last time we recorded. But now I think that makes total sense. So we'll talk about each episode in particular, but what's kind of your overall sense of let's just start with the Geonosians themselves. As you mentioned, Riki, it's a little weird that we're kind of back against this particular group on this planet, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. And I'm kind of curious, what's your take on the Geonosians as a race in this like in the movie in the show, and their role in the storyline?
Well, I mean, just in general, they're bugs. Right? Mm-hmm. They are multi-limbed, flying, exoskeletal beings. And I think in the science fiction canon, bugs have often been like that, ugly enemy. The inhuman ugly enemy. Starship Troopers, they went against bugs. Ender's Game, they go against bugs.
Right.
And on and on and on in science fiction. It's basically a trope. And I think it's used because, a lot of human beings are afraid of bugs. I myself have mild arachnophobia, and, you see a bug in your house and you're like, oh, you just kill it often instead of treating it like an animal, right? And so the use of bugs in science fiction is to kind of other the beings and make them seem subhuman. And especially the Geonosians don't speak English or Basic or whatever it's called in this universe. They communicate through a clicking sound, which is very inhuman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not even like other races that we've come across where they have a different language, but it's like we can hear the same sort of speech patterns. It is this like clicky, buggy sound, and it is sort of a perfect way to dehumanize the enemy. Like in the original Star Wars, we have stormtroopers, right, and they're like constantly wearing their helmets. You never get to see their faces; they're all the same. But now we've gone back and we're humanizing them as the clone troopers and getting to see like these personalities. And so then it's interesting to go and have this race of just bugs, right? And they're just like creepy, icky bugs. And then there's also like this sort of glossing over, so the reason they're coming to Geonosia is because there's a droid factory there, and they need to like stop the droid factory.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But there's still like an invading, occupying force, but it kind of like makes it okay because the planet they're invading is filled with gross, icky bugs. So
yeah, it's a weird one. And I first just on that trope comment, I think that's very true, especially because one thing that some of those other books you mentioned go very deep on this, but this doesn't really cover it. But I think it sort of alludes to it. is the idea that because often bugs have a kind of hive mind, that each individual isn't actually an individual with its own sentient thought, which again sort of makes it less morally valuable. That it's kind of like you're not killing a living being, you're cutting off a finger of the queen or whatever it is.
Yeah. Both Ender's Game and Starship Troopers, they are drones, and there's like a central brain / queen that controls the hive.
And we got that here too.
And it's interesting to me because I remember when I was watching these episodes, especially the first one, I was at first really taken aback because I was thinking this is the first episode where we really see them fighting against living sentient beings and killing living sentient beings. They're not just killing droids. And especially in that first episode, you don't really see much of the Geonosians, and they're not portrayed quite as horribly. And so in that first episode, landing at Point Rain, it really felt to me like they were trying to do something kind of interesting of like kind of humanizing the enemy a little bit and making it like there be more moral stakes. And I think that it's funny that they then like immediately pulled that back and went, no, they're still disgusting bugs, as though to say like, we're going to turn the morality of the war up, like we want to like move away from just killing droids, but by the smallest amount we possibly can, because we're still going to find every way is to make it seem like, no, it's still totally okay to kill these creatures.
Yeah, well, I would even argue that like the droids are in some ways more human because at least they have a language that we're understanding, right? Like they have cute little personalities. We later find out, like in either it's episode 7 or 8, that like they have names. So yeah,
the only named Geonosian is Poggle the Lesser.
Yeah,
which is
right.
I don't know. Is there a Poggle the Greater?
Yeah,
that and the Queen.
Does the queen have a name?
Yeah, they mentioned it in the opening narration for the last episode, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay.
So with that, let's kind of dive into the individual episodes. So first we have landing at Point Rain, and this is using the information stolen from Senator Clovis. So, and again, which is nice, like this is its own sort of 4-part arc, but it is still building on what we saw before. Using that information, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Kai-Adi-Mundi lead a combined clone trooper assault on a massive droid factory on Geonosis. Yeah, I like this episode a lot. I like that it made war seem a lot more realistic and hard to take. It just seemed a little bit more brutal and a little bit more interesting for that reason.
This episode felt like Vietnam. Like something out of Apocalypse Now.
Very much so.
The opening scene of that movie with the helicopters. Like, because the Republic uses these gunships, which are basically like transport helicopters.
Right.
And they're landing troops and trying to form a beachhead.
Yeah, the whole landing in a hot... I remember thinking that when I saw the Attack of the Clones, but especially here, I definitely think it's very much supposed to be a Vietnam reference. I did think, and I'm curious if this is one of those times where the writers are being brilliant or being terrible. But in terms of the dehumanization of the enemy, the kill count that Anakin and Ahsoka have, and that Mundi winds up jumping into, Now, one thing I noticed is that you almost only see Anakin and Ahsoka fighting droids. Because to me, like, if they were taking a kill count of, like, the Geonosians, that would seem much worse to me. Which, droid lovers are now yelling at me, but I understand the point. But even so, it seemed like if the point was to show how like, kind of numb to the suffering of war Anakin and Ahsoka have gotten, it's brilliant. If the attempt to just make it be funny, that seems really wrong to me. And I think, Riki, you made this written note, having Mundi take part in it just seems really off.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the, like, adding a layer of dehumanization, and that's kind of what I got with the Anakin, Ahsoka keeping count of how many droids they've killed. And it's interesting that, like, they play it off as though this is some sort of, like, yes, our ritual of counting how many droids we've killed, but this is the first and only time we see this. But yeah, so then they keep track throughout the battle, and at the end, Master Mundi ends up getting injured, and he and Obi-Wan are about to head back. So that I think doesn't Obi-Wan get injured as well?
Yeah, I think they're both hurt.
Yeah, so they're heading onto the manifold transport to go sit in a weird tube, and yeah, Anakin and Ahsoka are bantering about their kill count, and he just throws in like 57. It's just like, what? He's like, 57 is my kill count. What's my prize? It's like, my eternal admiration. It's like, oh, that's useless, and I don't want that.
Which I did think it maybe, again, if I want to give the writers credit, maybe that the idea was that he keeps track because he's a Jedi and he just knows these things, and he was almost sort of trying to be like, what's the point of this stupid thing? Look, I did better at you than your thing, and what do I win? Like, I kind of want it to be that, but sure. I kind of more think it's more him just being like, okay, I guess it's a little harmless battlefield fun. Why not? And if nothing else, I can twist Anakin's tail a little bit. Yeah,
that, right? Like, the idea of, like, well, I'm this, like, stuffy, older, like, Jedi Master, and I thoroughly trounced you guys in killing robots? Droids. But yeah, it seemed like see, Master Mundi's hip and cool, too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely the, we were talking about how I have to learn TikTok to, for my work, and it definitely feels like, someone my age being like, hey, kids, look at the TikTok video I did.
Look at all the ticks I've talked.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Now, so the kill count concept, I mean, I don't know where it first started, but we see it prominently in Lord of the Rings, right? The elf and the dwarf, who have names.
Well, yes, they certainly do.
And it's definitely part of Vietnam. I mean, I don't know if individual soldiers did this, but I know, the military would report the body count on the nightly news as, the proof of, victory. We did well, we killed 300, and they use pretty offensive words for the Vietnamese as they did it. And again, it's that sort of thing of are the writers being kind of dumb and racist, or are they doing a very subtle job of showing dumb racism? I can't quite tell.
Yeah. No, I think it's the latter, right? Because like we said, the beginning of this episode has very Apocalypse Now-ish vibes. And I think, when you think of Vietnam, you think of people taking other people's dog tags and having those sort of markers for how many people they've killed.
Yeah.
So I think this is a reference to that, but also trying to do it in a sort of lighthearted way. There is sort of a level of humor to it, especially at the end.
Right.
When they find that they've been, trounced by Master Mundi.
And I can understand to some extent the idea of horrible, mind-breaking situation, you've got to find some humor somewhere. I sort of say I can be incredibly critical of the behavior of people in warfare, knowing that I've never been under that kind of, stress, and stress seems like a far too light word, and it I don't think that justifies any of the horrible things that soldiers so often seem to do during war, but it is an interesting idea of how easy is it to judge that. The other thing I will say about this is kind of a small comment, but at one point Master Mundi, he's going off to do something dangerous, and one of the troops who is under his command says, good luck. And he says, there is no such thing as luck. Which I get is an interesting point of Jedi philosophy, but as a way to motivate your troops and to give them hope, that is a terrible thing to say.
And also just, not entirely accurate, right? I know the Jedi want to be in control of all circumstances at all times, but, you can't, Master Mundi. But yeah, the idea, I totally agree. Very, very unmotivating.
But I guess it establishes Ki-Adi-Mundi's character as just taking things very literally. Which puts his later comments into more context, I guess.
Yeah, in some ways, because I guess actually his approach to the counting thing is though it's almost he doesn't quite get it, Yeah. I kind of like that approach too.
So I think, Matthew, you're right. He just remembered how many he had killed. And he's like, oh, this is what I did. What's up?
What is the prize?
Yeah.
The prize is
What
my
is
respect.
going on, young people? Right?
Yeah.
With a skateboard.
Hello, fellow youths. Yeah. Okay, have either of you watched regular show?
No.
No, I haven't.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna say this because maybe someone listening has. In a way, Master Mundi almost reminds me of Pops, who's this like gentlemanly, sweet, but very out of touch older character. And I think that's kind of what they're going for. Like he's good at what he does, and he's wise in his own way.
The gumball machine?
No. Gumball machine is Benson, the guy with like the lollipop head.
You've shown me, but
I know. It's okay. You'll be hip and cool one day again. Yeah, it's this like, it seems like a character we've seen before. The idea of this older, kind of out of touch, and like funnily out of touch.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're when Master Mundi gives his kill count, we're not laughing at the fact that he's killed more droids than Anakin and Ahsoka. It's that like he's trying to participate in the TikToks, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because he doesn't have his Padawan. He's trying to be a part of things. One of the things on that...
He doesn't.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. Where's his Padawan?
Yeah. Well, I think the idea is that Jedi Knights have Padawans. Jedi Masters don't. But the one other thing that I was thinking was... So at that very end scene, Ahsoka is the one saying to Anakin, like, "Oh, hey, what was your count? What was your count?" And he's at first kind of really hesitant to get into it, and finally he sort of says, "Well, you know," he gets into it and argues, you know, he called in the airstrike, and doesn't that count?
Yeah.
Did you get the sense that it's maybe because, especially now that he's seen his mentor and good friend Obi-Wan be hurt, that there's a part of him that's like, okay, this isn't as much of a game as I thought. I need like that he's having a moment of like the gamesmanship feels a little bit uncomfortable to him.
Yeah, definitely, and also just in a trying to show that it maybe a sense of maturity as well. Like he very much seems like, oh, this is not the time, Ahsoka, but then she easily goads him into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost in a like light-hearted sense. It's interesting because I think it shows Ahsoka almost in a sense keeping her innocence despite the horrors that are taking place around her.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting move of his innocence has been taken away a little bit, but hers is not, and that's kind of a balance. And Riki, I'm sorry I stepped on you.
I think you're correct. So like the plot of this episode is that there's a landing zone that they are trying to converge their forces on from, I think, 3 or 4 different directions.
Right.
And most of their transports are shot down, and they have to make their way to the landing zone on foot. And I think Obi-Wan's transport like crashes closest to the landing zone, so they are trying to converge on his position,
right? Because
he's like pinned down. So yeah, it's a very serious situation. Yeah,
and again that is also to me a very Vietnam kind of situation of the pinned down landing zone, as well as there's an interesting back and forth with the admiral in space, and they're all asking him for help, and he basically says like, look, like I'm in the middle of a space battle myself, plus we're invading the whole planet, not just your one portion of it, and that was it. Like I'm liking this admiral more and more. Especially the fact that he just takes no shit from the Jedi. You know, he's pretty willing to say, like, okay, Jedi, that's nice, but your little battle is not the whole war. You know, get wrecked. I gotta go take care of something else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think pretty foreshadowing for the split that's going to take place.
Yeah, definitely. I would say spoiler warning, but I think most people know that by now.
Yeah, we're assuming people have seen the rest, like the movies at the very least, right?
Oh, that reminds me, actually. You mentioned earlier about the stormtroopers and the clones, but I'm going to actually you.
Oh, good.
Stormtroopers are not clones.
Yeah. Okay.
They're just like human conscripts. Sometime after the Clone Wars, they actually get rid of all the clones somehow for some reason.
Sure, but it's the same. Like they're using the same method, right? Like the same outfits? No,
they're just like normal human conscripts.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, because that's where like Finn comes from, right?
That's actually yet again different.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they never really establish where the Imperial troopers come from. in the main movies, but they do establish that the use of cloning has died out.
Okay, so in the prequels, they're clones.
Yeah.
Right.
In A New Hope,
They're human.
they're humans, but we don't know where those humans are from.
They're just
They're just like
soldiers,
volunteers.
yeah.
Okay, cool. And then in the newest 3 movies,
They're slaves.
okay,
Yeah.
fun.
And I think we've no reason to think that the Imperial soldiers are. I mean, it's nice to think they're volunteers because then we can feel a lot better about killing them. But yeah,
Sure.
it's never discussed. I don't think by Lucas in any way.
right.
It may have been mentioned in books.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I just assumed since we never seen a stormtrooper without its helmet that they were
Yeah.
clones.
Otherwise, they would have had to retcon the voice, all of their voices to be the
Boba Fett voice?
Australian
Yeah.
guy.
True. Yeah.
I'm gonna actually you. That's a New Zealand accent, but yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
And I only know that because I know the actor is Maori, the indigenous people
All
of,
right.
there. All right.
makes sense.
Anything more on this episode, or should we move on to what it feels like? It is kind of like it's a 4-episode arc, but it's kind of two-part episodes that go into it. So the second part. Go ahead.
I have one thing, just like a fun tidbit. I really enjoyed, so Anakin and Ahsoka's team has to make their way past a giant wall, because walls are useful in a war with flying things. But anyway,
Yeah.
they climb the wall, or they like force jump onto the wall, maybe, and put some explosives into it, and then they have to force jump off the wall. And Rex is also there. He's like jetpacked onto the wall. And they're like, Rex, get ready. And they're like, huh? For what? And they just like push him with the force off the wall. And then he's like, next time, just tell me when to jump.
No, he like screams and is like falling to his death,
yeah.
and then they like
And
catch
then
him.
they
They
catch him
force
at the
catch him at the bottom. So there's like a good couple seconds where Rex thinks he's gonna die.
Yeah.
It was that whole exchange was hilarious.
Next time, just tell me to jump. Yeah. Yeah. Let me know that you're gonna force catch me. It's
Yeah. That's I like that moment from Rex quite a lot. Yeah. So let's next go to the next episode, which is Weapons Factory.
Terrible name for an episode.
Yes. Ahsoka and Luminara Unduli's Padawan Barriss Offee sneak into the droid factory to destroy it, while their masters face the new indestructible super tanks. Yeah, so not a great name. I will say the super tank seemed incredibly disappointing to me, because basically they just had somewhat bigger guns and were a little bit harder to destroy, but pretty much the same.
And I would not, like, kid me would not want to buy these toys.
Yeah.
Like the Republic's Walker tanks,
Yeah.
I definitely would have wanted to buy. But these like super tanks, they're just like big turtles kind of on wheels, and they don't really have like all of the guns are hidden.
Yeah.
So like a panel opens up and then the guns fire, so it doesn't look cool for a kid, right? If the guns are hidden.
Yeah.
Which- Which seems like a weird way to judge these until you remember that like Lucas very clearly said he was creating the show in part to have like a whole new set of marketable toys.
You want to sell toys?
Yeah. I mean, it was brilliant.
I'm all about that.
He was the first movie maker to say, "Can I get like the rights to all the merchandising?" And that's how he made so much money off Star Wars. So, but yeah.
But he, like we watched the toys.
The toys that made us.
Yeah. There's an interesting backstory about the
We'll
Kenner
get into that in another
licensing.
episode for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
What's your take on the new Padawan we meet, Barriss Offee?
She seems like classic Padawan, like everything a Padawan should be if they had a master who wasn't Anakin.
Oh dear.
Well, I mean,
She's polite.
She's polite. She follows orders. She's like, yeah. And so at the very beginning of the episode is Ahsoka trying to explain the plan.
Oh God.
To the troops, and Anakin is just constantly interrupting her. And she calls him out on it, and she's like, "You were interrupting. I wasn't interrupting you." Like he interrupts her, telling him that she was interrupting him, and it seems like such a left turn from the previous episode where they were getting along and they had this like little banter going, and we're really meshing well to this like Anakin is back to treating her very much like a child, and has no faith in her at all, but also is in this like needs to control her. So yeah, Barriss is like everything a Padawan should be. And even when they get to, like, Barriss and Ahsoka get into a sticky situation, and Luminara, Barriss's master, is, like, willing to accept that Barriss might die, basically.
Right.
Whereas Anakin says the line, "I refuse to let her die," which is, like, not really your call, Anakin. Some things you can't control.
When else does he refuse to let someone die?
Right?
Yeah. I was so confused by this whole plot because, like, I really liked how the two of them showed up, and I think, like, the dynamic between the two of them is so different, you know? Barriss is much more sort of demure and, like, you know, subservient, really, to Unduli, but Unduli also treats her with so much more respect, you know, and it feels like a much more respectful relationship, and kind of a nice counterpoint to make Ahsoka and Anakin's bickering seem silly. But then, like, if you want to show me a character who is supposed to be showing that she is more level-headed than Anakin because she realizes the cold, hard truth that Anakin refuses to realize, that truth has to be true.
Sure,
you know?
Yeah.
And when it turns out that actually she's wrong and they can rescue, and if she did her, I don't care enough, you know, I'm not going to care, I'm not attached, I'm going to accept this, someone would die who wouldn't have to. Like, I want to root for her, but that makes it much harder.
But I think it really sets up, like, Anakin's character nicely, because, whether the Padawans lived or died was kind of up in the air, especially from their perspective. Like, they didn't know. And him being right in that situation gives him that idea that he can control all these situations, and just, like, gives him the confidence to keep doing this shit. Doing this stuff in the future.
Well, it's the flyboy hero is always right,
Right.
syndrome in these movies and TV shows, right? And it's why we love The Last Jedi.
Oh, yes.
Because Poe ends up being wrong. Like, he does the flyboy thing and does blow up the ship, but it's like, you lost half of our bombers.
Yeah.
And we can't afford that. It's like, oh.
If you'd have just followed orders, things would have gone better. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true, and I think you're right. It's a kind of, you know, Anakin winds up in a kind of results-oriented thinking, where he does something that, yes, in this particular moment is true, but overall is generally not going to be, but he learns the wrong lesson from it. That makes a lot of sense. I also feel like we're trying to establish the idea that these tactical droids who speak in the very kind of like computery heroes my thoughts, that they're supposed to be these like tactical battle wizards. They're so dumb.
Yeah.
Like, there's that one who he sees a bomb get thrown next to the tank right next to him and is like, aha, Jedi, that won't hurt the tank. And blows up right next to him and takes him out. Like,
yeah, they're comically bad in a completely different way than the normal battle droids.
Yeah, I enjoy the comedy of it, but I really wish they would have like some. If you try to be like, no, we promise this is the this is like the actual like competent ones. Like,
but they have been competent in the past, right?
Yeah, they've had
that's actually
droids
true.
That are actually like scary and actually seem good at what they do, but the vast majority do not.
Yeah, I mean, there was the one at the end of season 1 that had the hostages like around his gun emplacements, and he's like, they will be unable to attack us, like, because they won't want to kill the hostages.
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah, that's evil and smart.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they've chosen to do classic computer robot voice for these ones. I find it kind of annoying, the weird vocal modulation of it, but I also don't understand what the point is. Like, we clearly have the battle droids who don't have that same like vocal modulation, so clearly you can have them talk in a non-computery sounding way. Why do the quote-unquote scarier droids sound more like computers?
To sell more toys.
Yeah, I think it's
very I don't even know if they had toys for these droids.
Yeah. Well, they're like, it's interesting. It feels like this level of another level. Like, we've talked a lot about dehumanization in this episode, but another layer of it in a different application, I guess. Like, they look more human than the battle droids do, and that they've got like round faces. They're less, like, gangly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, then they sound much more robotic.
Right.
I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
But, and yeah, the, like, ha ha ha, this will not destroy the tank. And then it blows him up. It's just a, like... It's funny. It's very funny. But also, like, how have they been programmed? Like, is this tactical droid just programmed to think of, like, protect the superior weapon and that's what's important?
Yeah.
And then isn't even considering its own well-being?
Well, and especially because, like, we're at a point now where we are constantly seeing tactical droids being like, oh, look, Jedi. Okay, I'll send a bunch of battle droids at them, and that'll stop the Jedi.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't work. It's clearly not working.
The word for attempting the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, I believe that's the technical definition of insanity. You know? And yet that's
the quote, yeah.
The fact that no one has ever gotten, like, all the tactical droids together and been like, by the way, Jedi are badass. Let's be careful around them. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
It's getting to be a thing. Anything else on this episode, or shall we move on to the go from a Vietnam War movie to zombie horror movie?
Zombie horror movie. I really like Luminaria and Barriss. I know we touched on them a little bit. But I think as a pair, they're really interesting. Especially I like how, I don't know, are they the same species or have they just made them look visually similar?
I think they are. They both have the kind of spot type things, and they both have the purple lips.
And like the green skin and yeah. I just think they're really cool characters, and it's just nice to see, I don't know, nice to see another Padawan, like who's Ahsoka's age, and they get to interact together. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's all true. Yeah, and I think to me the most interesting part is it's, you know, there's the old thing about, like, you never know that something is strange until you see what normal is. And I can imagine, like, if Ahsoka, the only, 90% of her understanding of the Jedi comes from Anakin, she probably thinks this is what's normal. And so the more time she spends around other Jedi and their Padawans and starts to be like, whoa, my teacher's kind of out of left field here. And it also does again remind me, why did they let Anakin keep a Padawan? Yeah,
there's been so many reasons to just be like, you know what, Anakin, you're a bad influence. We're gonna take her away.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Like,
sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unless there's nothing else, why don't we move on to the zombie horror movie part of the Clone Wars right after this commercial break that we have no control over. So welcome back, and now let's talk about Season 2, Episode 7, Legacy of Terror. And this is the beginning of our zombie plot, in which Luminaria is captured while looking for Separatist leader Poggle the Lesser, and it's up to Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Commander Cody to enter a colony of Geonosian zombies to find her. Yeah, what's our take on Geonosian zombies?
Yeah, like we were saying, I like how they lean into the horror movie. It is very classic horror trope. In this part, we just get, like, the first half of the zombies. Yeah. So the first is, like, they're going in, they find the queen, they can't kill all these bugs for some reason. They find out that she's, like, mind controlling them by laying eggs, which hatch into worms and then crawl up their noses.
Yeah.
Which is super fun.
Which they made a reference at one point to wondering if the worms would go up the nose or through the mouth or in the ear, which I think has to have been a Star Trek Wrath of Khan reference.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of glad they didn't go through the ear, but I feel like they mentioned it just to kind of, like, be like, yeah, we know we're kind of doing the Wrath of Khan thing.
Yeah, and it's Obi-Wan who says it. So he has this, like, lighthearted, sarcastic, like, so Luminara has been captured. She's gone down there to look for the queen? I don't know why she's gone into this underground. Poggle, yeah.
She's hunting Poggle.
She's hunting Poggle, who's gone into this underground cave structure area. Finds the queen and her minions, sends a message to Obi-Wan saying, like, if you're following me, turn around and leave. Obi-Wan goes, oh man, we should really find her now, and does not turn around and leave, and in fact goes in deeper. Yeah, they find her. She's been held captive, and Anakin wants to just go in there, lightsabers blazing, and grab her and get out. Obi-Wan wants to, like, sit back, consider things, So yeah, the line of like, is it going to go through the nose and the ear? They're both standing there talking to the queen. Anakin's like, let's go and grab Luminara right now. He's like, no, let's just wait. Where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah.
Anakin's like, I don't think she wants to find out where it's going to go. He's like, no, let's just see. Let's just hold back here. So I think it's also referencing that they know that they're doing a takeoff, Wrath of Khan, and also showing that like Obi-Wan will be sarcastic to anyone and anything at any time.
Yeah. Well, and I know, Riki, you had some thoughts on Obi-Wan as the animal lover of the show.
So Obi-Wan, I don't know if you noticed this, but any chance he has to ride an animal on a planet, he does it.
Yes.
I mean, I think it starts in the movies, right? In the third movie, Revenge of the Sith, when he's like hunting down General Grievous, he ends up riding like this lizard thing.
Yeah, that uses like a sound. It has like a sound weapon, like something like that.
Yeah. But then throughout the Clone Wars TV series, he's always riding stuff. I mean, we'll get to more of this, but he has like this love of animals, it seems. And in this episode, Anakin kills one of the worms on their way out. He's like, "Oh, ew," and just like lightsabers it. And Obi-Wan
steps on it.
I thought he lightsabered it and then stepped on it. I don't know. He kills it. Anakin kills the worm.
Mm-hmm.
And Obi-Wan is like, "Oh, but I wanted to study that."
And then Anakin says, "You can study the bottom of my shoe."
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was a kind of tough moment there. But interesting that it shows the two different perspectives they have. You wrote in the notes, Riki, that Obi-Wan is the galaxy's Steve Irwin, which I really liked. It's to me, I at first I wondered if it, because I read your notes before I watched it. I was wondering if this was going to be kind of a like sanctity of life thing, and I don't think it's quite that. It's just that Obi-Wan loves to study these things, you know.
I think it's a genuine curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and just like if he weren't a Jedi fighting in a war, he would want to be a zookeeper and show kids all the animals.
I think that's very true.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that he has this great respect for the Geonosians or the Queen or anything like that. As a like, it's a very paternal sort of like, I wanted to study it, not a like, that is a living thing and we should respect it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially the way when they finally get to the Queen's chamber, as I mentioned before, Anakin wants to go in, lightsabers blazing. Obi-Wan's like, no, let's just go talk to her. And Anakin's like, oh, that's so dumb, but alright, let's go do it. And in Obi-Wan's like super sarcastic way, he's talking to her and really talking down to her, and is like, well, you're not the queen of this planet anymore, Your Majesty. Which is just like super colonizer-y, right? Like, we're displacing you. This is the Republic's planet now. I'm sorry, you think you're the queen, but you're not anymore, so bye.
Yeah, I hoped that plot line was going to go in a very different direction. Mm-hmm. I thought it was going to be like, because the queen and the zombies clearly seem like much more just kind of like animalistic, and I'm trying not to use kind of like colonizer language myself, but like they seem much more a very different approach to things than the Geonosians we've seen before, like Poggle and the like.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of hoped that we were going to kind of get an idea of like that she and these Geonosian zombies living underground didn't really realize just what Poggle and all of them were up to, and it was sort of like, how dare they, cause this war to come to my planet, and I'm going to work with you Jedi to overthrow this. And so I felt really disappointed when they were just like, nope, we're just straight up horror mustache controllers. I'm just going to eat you,
Yeah.
No, bug or whatever. Like, anytime there's a queen, you just kill it. Right? Like, Aliens, Sigourney Weaver, you got to kill the queen.
Yeah, and it had very, like, voodoo kind of vibes, too, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, she's using her eggs to... And even the word zombie, right? Like, I think that comes from... like old voodoo? I'm not like.
Thought it came from the cranberries.
It came from the cranberries. I looked up. I remember watching an old, like black and white horror movie called "I Walked with a Zombie." I don't know if either of you are familiar.
I haven't seen it. No.
It's okay. This is me looking at the Googles. It's a 1943 horror film. It's kind of like a cult classic. Basically, there's the zombie is like an African man who's been hypnotized. Like, it's not a zombie in the... Yeah, it's like a zombie in the sort of voodoo. Zombie is being used in a similar way here, despite them being like, it's sort of a fusion of the two, right? Like, we do have that the Geonosians are undead,
right?
But also they're being mind controlled, right? They're not mindless. It's the queen controlling them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think you're right. I mean, as I understand it, the word zombie, which I just took a quick look, and it does. Most etymology believes that it has origins in a West African word that does come out of Voodoo culture, but that also is connected to a Spanish word, sombra, which means kind of shadow or ghost, and that it might be connected to that. I'm not a language etymologist. I'm just going with what Etymology Online is telling me. But I think it's true that there have always been a couple of different things that we sort of put under the zombie idea. And one of them is kind of like pseudo magically or spiritually reanimated corpses in this kind of like this kind of a culture, and then also more the created in a laboratory Dr. Frankenstein kind of a thing. And yeah, I feel like if they hadn't been Geonosians, or however you pronounce it, I would have liked this a lot more if it had been some other race that had not already been so dehumanized. Then I would have been really into it. To do yes, we already established that they are sort of, ugly, horrible, scary bugs, and so you can kill them without any, concern. But now we're going to make them even more screwed up by making them zombies. It just felt a little much.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying with we've already gone through such colonizer themes with the Geonosians, and even if you think about the click language that they're speaking, I think we can make direct correlation to some of the click languages present in African cultures, right? Yep. So this idea of we were othering them, we're colonizing them, and now we're incorporating some voodoo magic in there too, is very, I don't want to say maybe not necessarily problematic, problematic for the actions of the heroes, definitely.
Yeah.
But an interesting theme that they're taking in this show, as well as incorporating that sort of traditional, quote unquote, traditional horror.
Yeah, and here,
what were you guys doing about zombies?
Here, I have trouble giving the writers more credit. It does feel like the writers wanted, because again, showing 8-year-olds our heroes killing other sentient living beings is a hard thing. So maybe they wanted it to be better to kill. I did though, and again, this kind of goes to a debate we were having about when they were on the Twilight Planet before, and so we may see it differently again. I liked the soldiers calling them bugs. It was obviously very racist and very problematic, but I felt like that was kind of the point. It was again reinforcing the way that in warfare soldiers
dehumanize.
Yeah, they dehumanize, and that they it's an unfortunate thing that armies have learned, is that in order to get soldiers to be okay, to not have any conscience about shooting the enemy, you have to completely dehumanize them. And certainly we did this to Americans about Japanese troops in World War II. We did it to English and American soldiers about Germans in World War I. It's definitely always been a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, bugs just have so much history. And this, going through the caves, the catacombs, that has a very bug hunt feel, just like Starship Troopers.
Yep.
And it's very claustrophobic, because these things, do the zombie ones fly? I don't remember if they were flying.
No, they
but they
jump
can
really far. Yeah.
But they can crawl, they can crawl on the ceiling, right? Yeah. And it's just very creepy to be in a catacomb like that with these creatures. And so I don't think that aspect would have worked if they had been human or more humanoid zombies. The fact that they are bugs in these caves is what gives it the atmosphere.
And also, I mean, it's shot very much as you would a horror movie, right? You even have Obi-Wan sends 2 troopers off on their own.
Oh yeah.
It's don't split the party, Obi-Wan. Come on. But sends them off, and they've just got their headlamps on.
Mm-hmm.
So they go and they encounter one of them, and then we see a scene of the other clone flips around, and just his headlight illuminates the face of the zombie bug that's right up on his face before the screams. Right, so it's got a lot of that horror movie troping, and it's creepy. The bug element is creepy, and the queen is, acting like a queen ant or queen bee, right? She's sitting there basically immobile, producing eggs, and then the zombies are very mechanically like going through and processing them, getting them to hatch, and sticking them up each other's nose.
Yeah. It's very strange. Yeah. I think this is probably my least favorite episode of the 4. It's got some good parts, but I think just the whole zombie thing and the way it played out just really didn't sit well with me.
Yeah, the zombie thing is it's interesting. I really liked how it showed Anakin and Obi-Wan's different takes on dealing with conflict. Like Anakin wanting to go in lightsabers ablazing, Obi-Wan wanting to just go and talk to the queen. And I wish that Obi-Wan would have actually wanted to go and talk to the queen to try and just like talk to her, instead of it being a distraction strategy.
Yeah.
So that the clones could get around and they could cave in the catacombs on her and the rest of the zombies. But yeah, they get out. They're about to head back. They've got to again split up because they have to do a supply run. And Obi-Wan and Anakin send the Padawans. Yeah, it's Luminara's Padawan, and his name is Barris.
Yeah, let's get into that last episode. The wonderful title, Brain Invaders.
Brain Invaders. Well, it's, again, like Legacy of Terror and Brain Invaders both seem like I could see them in that, like, goopy font in a sort of, like, The Blob.
Yeah, very 1950s, like, pulp horror movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You take your date to a drive-in theater with the hope that they get scared and cuddle up against you, kind of thing.
100%. Like Brain Invaders from the planet Geonosians.
Oh yeah, God! Now I want to see that as a 1950s pulp horror movie. So in this one, Ahsoka and Barris are to transport critical supplies to a medical station, but their clone troops are infested with mind-controlling Geonosian worms, which try to kill the Jedi. Barris is also infected by the mind-controlling worm. So yeah, so we get the kind of, again, a horror movie trope of your friends are being mind-controlled and you don't want to hurt them, but also they're going to kill you, and so how do you fight them and all that kind of thing. What's your take on this episode?
Oh, I mean, this is a little bit of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, crossed with John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they had more of the Thing aspect, because it's kind of like revealed, like, oh no, like the clones are somehow being controlled, and then everyone's evil. So I wish there had been just a little bit more of, we know one of you is evil, but not which one, and like who done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's even the very beginning. It starts, and one of the clones, they're all just like taking a nap after having fought these zombies.
As you do.
It's fair. And one of the worms like crawls up the nose of one of the sleeping clones. And then they're all waking up, and they're like, oh, come on. I forget the clone's name. But they're like, oh, come on, like, time to wake up, time to go. Everybody turns around, and he does like the creepiest Exorcist spider wake up move. And then the other clone's like, oh, welcome back to the land of the living. Like, yeah, undead. Funny. And it just has the sack full of those little eggs that the worms hatch from, and is carrying it onto the ship. And I think that reminds me of like so many like horror thriller movies, right? Where it's like, you don't know I'm the host, I'm gonna carry this invasion into you.
Yeah.
Body Snatchers.
So I found myself...
Body Snatchers did it. I think there's another, like, Invaders from Mars was another one.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminded me of, like, Aliens, too, but it's been a long time since I've seen that, so I could be very wrong.
Yeah. No, but there's definitely the sort of, like, anyone could be a host kind of a thing. Although,
Mm-hmm.
they seem to go back and forth that sometimes you can pretend that you're not a host, and other times it's very, very apparent, which was a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I have to say, like, I think this is my favorite episode. I think there's a lot of great stuff in it. Most of which is kind of ancillary or totally irrelevant to the main plot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought the main plot was, like, you know, there's some interesting stuff there, but it's pretty by the numbers. I thought it was a little interesting that, like, sometimes they seem to be trying hard not to kill them because they're like, oh, it's not their fault, they're controlled. But then at one point, Barriss is just like, nope, this guy's on top of me. I just, you know, gut him with a lightsaber. But yeah, I thought most of the cool stuff was kind of like the little asides that were happening throughout the episode.
Like what?
Well, so one is, I think my favorite moment is, when Ahsoka and Barriss are just kind of having their, like, you know, we're in the mess hall of the war room, we're gonna, like, have a chat, and they start talking about, what life will be like after the war. And they get into a conversation where, the question comes up, are they supposed to be keepers of the peace or warriors? And Barriss says, you know, we're not supposed to be warriors, we're supposed to be keepers of the peace. And Ahsoka answers, well, yes, but can we keep the peace without being warriors? Which I just thought was such an interesting thing, and it gets to a lot of the kind of subtle questions that the show has been asking all along about, you know, how does being generals fundamentally change what the Jedi are? Or expose a problem of who the Jedi have been this whole time.
Yeah, definitely.
What was your take on that discussion?
Riki?
I actually forgot that discussion.
It's okay.
Like, for me, like, this is all about the horror stuff, and I was just enthralled.
No, that's legit.
I wanted more of it.
That's legit. I'm kind of glad we can get different things out of it, because I'm definitely not the horror guy. I'll just say one more on that, and then let you guys talk more about the horror. To me, another interesting point in this is, especially given a thing you pointed out, Anakin, Riki, about where Anakin goes. At one point, they're talking about this, you know, the life after the war, and Ahsoka says, you know, I will say, like, she's talking about Anakin, and she says, I don't know how peacetime will agree with him, which I just thought was a very interesting, like, insight she has to the person he's becoming.
Yeah, we get a lot of fun foreshadowing moments about the person Anakin's becoming in this episode.
Oh my goodness! So the music, right?
Yeah,
I missed it the first time we watched it.
So,
but the second time it just, like, hit me like a bolt of lightning.
So what was the specific moment you're talking about? Just for those of us who haven't seen it in a while.
So, Ahsoka and Barriss are on this ship, and they get a message out that the ship has been infected with the mind control worms. So Anakin goes to Poggle the Lesser, who they captured in the last episode, and goes to ask him what's up with these worms. And Poggle, using his interpreter droid, is like, I'm not going to tell you anything, cop. And Anakin is like, oh, really? And the musical cue is just perfect. It is Vader's theme from the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And it just like subtly plays very softly, and Anakin basically beats Poggle up.
Yeah.
To get the information.
That was such a good moment. I think because you're right. It especially playing out against what Ahsoka was saying about him. It's just it's that nice reminder of, like, he's not there yet, but this is the path he's on, and this is one of those moments where that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the first one, right, that we've seen in this series, I think. I noticed the music come up in a later episode, so it surprised me a little that it came up here.
I don't think the music has happened yet, but I think there was one or two moments in season 1 where we saw him kind of lose it, in part because of his attachment to others. Certainly him make bad decisions because of his attachment to others that kind of foreshadow things. But this is the first time where I see... I think this is the first moment where I see him kind of, like, use dark side energy. Especially the Force choke. Like, I don't think we ever see anyone who is a Jedi Force choke anyone in the shows or the movies.
Other than Anakin? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they've made some other references to him becoming Vader. earlier in the season. But yeah, this is spoiler alert. But yeah, it's just like, it's really well done, and I mean, demonstrating the things like Anakin's main thing, right? Like, he can't have control, so he's gonna get control of the situation no matter what. Right? He's got an attachment to Ahsoka, which he shouldn't have, but I mean, it's there. He loves her, and he's not gonna let somebody that he loves die, and he's gonna do anything to stop it, regardless of the costs.
Yeah, I think it's very true.
And then he like lies or sidesteps questions about how he got toggled to talk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it's that thing where it's like, the worst part is that he does get the information. So in his mind, he does learn this works, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important, right? Like, if these tactics didn't work, if he was being reprimanded for them, then the switch to Vader wouldn't be as convincing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're really seeing how, in Anakin's mind, like, this is all falling into place, this all makes sense. And then, ultimately, when he does turn to the dark side, it makes more sense as to why he's chosen to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a comment I think I read a lot of reviewers make, is that this show does what the clone movies were supposed to do but failed, which is that they really show the fall of Anakin and like why he goes on his path. So yeah, one other quick foreshadow thing that Riki, you again pointed out in our notes, that moment when the clone troopers are granted their worm controlled, but they're talking about what to do about the Jedi, and one of them just kind of says pretty ominously, "We know how to handle Jedi." And yeah, I thought that was a really nice, like, very subtle, but Order 66, what's the word? Pre-shadowing moment, not foreshadowing moment.
Foreshadowing? Yeah, well, I think there's even a moment where Barriss and Ahsoka are talking and saying something like, "Oh, the clones will never hurt us."
Oh.
It's just like, oh, just you wait.
No, never.
Yeah. So, so you want to talk about the horror side of it now?
Sure. I mean, I'm also not much of a horror fan, so I'll leave that mostly to Riki.
Well, I mean, it's just I love mind control bugs and things, and those moments where someone formerly an ally has become an enemy.
Yeah.
And I wish so like you said, Barriss becomes infected and turns on Ahsoka, but it's like too obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, when she comes back, she just like doesn't say anything. Ahsoka's like, "Well, what's going on? Like, did you do the thing?" And then Barriss just like uses the Force to shatter the glass between them and attack her.
Well, I think,
and I wish there had been like more dialogue.
Yeah,
where she's like kind of playing along and then tries to like ambush her.
Yeah, it would make. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Okay, it would be nice. Yeah, either her playing along, or if it was the kind of thing of her like slowly losing control and eventually losing out, or something like that. But either one, I think that would have been a much more interesting way to do it.
I was gonna say I kind of like the way that it happened because it made it seem like Barriss was sort of internally trying to fight the worm. Like, if she had come and was just like, "Everything's normal, don't worry, I'm definitely not infected with this brain worm," then to me it would seem too much like the brain worm has full control over her. And there's even a part where doesn't like Barriss ask Ahsoka to kill her?
Yeah, at the very end.
Yeah. And like at the very end, okay. But like Ahsoka's like trying to get through to her and be like, "Remember who you are," when they're fighting, right? And she's telling her like, "Remember that you're still in there. Remember who you are." Trying to like encourage her, and so I think it makes sense, especially with like her being a Jedi and having the like powerful mind trope.
I thought it was because Ahsoka had already released the cryo gas. So like that's the weakness of the worms,
right?
That Anakin gets out of Poggle is like cold. you can freeze them out of their brains. So she turns the AC on the ship, basically.
Well,
advanced version.
Advanced AC, the hyper AC.
So I thought that the worm was weakening inside of Barriss because of that.
Yeah. That's definitely how I took it. Which I think, again, in some ways I kind of liked. Like, I think it would have been too easy to tell, like, Jedis have stronger mind powers so they can fight these in some way. So,
yeah,
that's a more interesting twist on it.
There were parts of this episode that hit a little too close, I guess. Like, when they're on the ship and they're talking about bringing them back, like, docking them with the main ship, and, Master Fisto?
Kid Fisto.
Wearing
Wearing a shirt.
Yep. Not for long. Is talking to them and is like, don't worry, like, we've got all our safety protocols, we're gonna let you, like, dock and come on board. Don't worry.
Bad idea.
Right? And I'm like, this is a bad idea. And I was just, like, low-key waiting for him to be like, we're gonna stay 6 feet apart from each other and then the worms can't get to us. Right? It just felt so much like the infected cruise ship is about to dock with the rest of it, and I was kind of like, oh no.
Yeah. You're in outer space.
Yeah.
Like, you literally have the perfect quarantine situation, which is that ship is going to stay in outer space.
Yeah.
Like, why would you ever dock?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was weird because normally it's Anakin and Ahsoka who are the, let's do the crazy thing, don't worry, I'm good enough that I can take the risk on. And so to see this time Ahsoka being the, like, no, let's be super careful, and Fisto, who, by the way, I know it's Kit Fisto. Every time I hear that, I think it's Kid Fisto.
Kid
the
Fisto
fastest Jedi in the West. But like, but yeah, I thought it was a weird switch, and it didn't seem to really make sense for their characters. And I guess the idea is that they needed that medicine ASAP, but still, it seemed a little off.
Push it out the cargo door.
Yeah.
And just like, I don't know.
We're gonna send the medicine to you.
Pick it up with like some droids or something. I don't know.
Or heck, even if like Kit Fisto is like, I'm gonna get into a like rocketeering suit and take this medicine to you. But yeah, just come aboard the ship that has everybody else on it. Seemed like a real bad idea.
It seemed like mostly it was a way to create the tension of, will the ship crash because Ahsoka and Barriss are flying it together, are fighting in the cockpit, and I fail to imagine that there isn't some kind of autopilot that automatically kicks in when you're about to ram something, unless you've like told it to ram something.
Yeah, sure.
And like, of all the drama in this episode, watching the, like, pudgy little, the pokey little puppy tugboats trying desperately to, like, stop the ship with their tractor beams, which included at one point a scene of the clone pilots, like, doing that thing where you, like, lean back and pull back on the controls, like in a plane, which doesn't make any sense in a ship with a tractor beam, but like, okay, that's fine.
Because in a plane, you're actually like fighting against the air shield.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that whole plot line seemed a little bit silly.
Yeah, but it was, and then I liked the debrief sort of at the end, where Ahsoka and Anakin are talking, and Ahsoka says that, Barriss wanted her to kill her, and Anakin's just like, and you couldn't do it. And she's like, no, and thinks that makes her weak, and he's kind of like, no, it makes you strong. Which is like, in a way, I agree, but also it's just showing, again, Anakin's attachment, which is the thing that he is not supposed to have as a Jedi.
Yeah.
So Master Luminara would have just killed Barriss.
100%.
Oh yeah,
100%.
All right.
And interesting, I think we see that in that, because I was pointing out before the, like, who kills who. I think now that I think of it, Ahsoka never actually kills one of the troopers, whereas Barriss just, like, guts one with a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think it's a good point, definitely. I thought I had some other witty and erudite thing to say about this episode. That's now completely out of my head. So, any other kind of closing thoughts?
Well, you've written some notes about Jedi sleep in their clothes?
Oh, yeah, I did think... And again, I think it's just... we see the scene of, like, the Ahsoka and the other one napping. And maybe it's because they were just taking a quick nap. But, like, they're wearing the exact same clothes they're always wearing. And it made me think, like, have we ever seen Ahsoka change clothes? Like, I can believe that Anakin has, like, 3 or 4 different robes. But, like, she's always in that sort of off-red tube top thing.
Maybe, yeah, she's probably just got a closet full of them.
Yeah, that's possible.
Closet full of capes?
Yes, that's a reference I was gonna make. Then I was like, nah. Yeah. But then you did it.
I do wonder if part of that's an animation thing, and like that's
100%.
just much easier to keep drawing the same character. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. So
yeah, this is a tangent. One of my favorite like cartoons from back when I was a kid. It was a Saturday morning cartoon called The Weekenders.
Okay.
I don't know if either of you are familiar. Wayne Brady wrote the theme song for it. It's great. But one of the reasons why I liked it is they drew the characters in different clothes, like daily. Like they had a few set outfits. The show took place over a weekend, so like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they'd always have different outfits on, and like even episode that have different outfits, which is again like for animation, it's so much easier to just have your model and stick with the same outfit all the time, unless there's something that specifically requires it, like Padme switches outfits frequently. But yeah. Oh boy, does she. But yeah, anyway, yeah. That was my tangent.
No, it's cool. Yeah, so I think that I'm about ready to wrap up. Any kind of last thoughts from you all?
More zombies.
Yes.
Less zombies.
We will get more zombies, I hope. Anyway, thank you guys as always. To our fans, what do you all think? We'd love to hear your thoughts on these episodes, or the Clone Wars in general. You can find us on Facebook, and Facebook at Superhero Ethics. Star Wars.
Every time.
I have done it the opposite way though on Superhero Ethics.
Star Wars Ethics.
We're debating. I'm debating kind of putting them all under one brand name of the Ethical Panda, because we're part of the Stranded Panda podcast network. But yes, you can find us. Links to both our Facebook and our Twitter are in the show notes for this. You can also email us. Again, that link will be on there. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you thought. And also, we would love it if you like this show, if you want to help us grow the show, if you want to help us be able to do more things and reach more people and have more audience conversation, it'd be really great if you can go into iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast and just leave us a review. I hope a 5-star review, but any review you want to give is great. But it's just a really nice way to help us move up the search algorithms in those programs and get more people watching. Right now I think a lot of people are thinking about the Clone Wars again because of the new season that's come out. We may well be recording something on that pretty soon. But I'd love it if more people who are looking for Clone Wars could find this. So if you get a moment, write a review, tell us what you think. Even if it's not a great review, we'd still love to hear what you think and hear how we can do better. So Riki, Sarah, as always, thank you. To our fans, thank you all very much. Have a good day.